Hi Rico, how's it going?
Good. How you doing, Joe?
Good. Well, we want to start by saying hi to everyone who's been watching and thank you for watching as we count down to the for now at least, series finale of the show. As we get towards the end, why don't we sort of loop back to the beginning, talk a little bit about how you got involved in Life Below Zero.
Sounds good. And thank you to all the people, the fans that watch the show. We really appreciate it.
Oh, are you there?
Yeah, I'm
Oh
there.
yeah. Okay. I think we're still good. So tell us about how you got involved in Life Below Zero.
I was doing some moose hunting back in Huslia. I was hunting for elders, and this native corporation, had someone out there doing. He was a freelance out of Salt Lake City. Kai, his name is. He actually worked on First Alaskans in the end, but he was shooting a documentary for the corporation. And one of the locals asked me to go take him out hunting. So I brought him out hunting. We got a moose, and then the corporation dropped the project. So he ended up like hitting me up later and asked me to do a YouTube channel. So he got me a YouTube channel, uploaded the video, and I did some writing for it. And it started rolling. I think it hit like 3 million views within a year. And that's when National Geographic started to reach out and contact me through YouTube.
How did you find that transition going from like having one person filming you to like a full crew?
It was like, I think the first day I filmed, I remember this huge airplane landed out at the family cabin. It was a beaver or otter. I don't know what it was. It had a turbo engine. But I grew up out there and I've never seen an airplane like that landing at our cabin. So I knew it was serious business when I seen that. And then just having like like four people following me was a lot more difficult as far as like driving snow goes because a lot of them tip over a lot. They're not used to driving, so it was a lot harder to move around with the crew, and especially hunting too. They're a lot louder than just one person. Plus, they're not accustomed to doing that, and they're carrying like awkward equipment. Like a rifle is one thing for me to carry, just sling it over my shoulder, but imagine carrying like a camera that's kind of long through the woods. So they have a tough job, and but other than that, it was good, and like seeing the end product was like, yeah, you see why so many people are following you. They got a lot of good angles and a lot of good equipment and a lot of good knowledge on what they're doing.
Let's go back even further, and you talked a lot about this on the show. But talk a little bit about your childhood. You know, you mentioned sometimes that you guys were pretty isolated out there. We just do it in a quick soundbite on the show, but maybe go into a little bit of more depth about your childhood, what it was like, and how long you were out there, and what was it like growing up, I guess, without much or any outside contact.
My childhood was different than pretty much anyone I know because I grew up in the woods with my family. My mom and dad had 14 kids together out at living in the woods. So from
14
the time,
kids.
yeah, they had 14 kids together. And my dad delivered like nine of the kids, you know. A lot of kids were just born in the woods and raised up. So we weren't in touch with society much, especially back when I was growing up. We had a 9.9 horse, like not even a 10 horsepower motor for a boat on a 34-foot long boat that my dad made out of the pine trees out there, or spruce trees, not pine, but spruce trees. And the snow goes were real old school Elans, one cylinder. I mean, you practically had to drag those things around the country. So no communication, no, like GPS or no phones or electricity or running water. So there was one line communication, just the AM radio coming in, what we heard. Nothing came out as far as communication. And we were out there all year, every year. We got like after the ice went out, we'd wait about 3 or 4 days. The ice would clear out on the river, and then we'd all pile in the boat and we'd go to Huslia, which we call going to town. We didn't even call it Huslia. And we'd go down 100 miles downriver to Huslia, and we'd be there from like 1 to 3 weeks every year. And that was our only touch with society. And that was a little village of Huslia. So it was a lot different growing up out there than what I live today. And yeah, we ran out of food a lot. I remember growing up, there was times we were really hungry. So, where we grew up too is a lot harder to catch animals compared to like Huslia downriver has got more game. There's not as much like just jack spruce and headwater country. We did have caribou in the winter, so yeah, it was a lot different growing up. I can go on and on, but it's just very isolated.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that more. I find that obviously super fascinating. I'm sure a lot of people do as well. Like, I mean, I knew you understood, but like, did you know there was, Fairbanks and Anchorage, and did you have books that would talk about New York City, or were you completely homeschooled, or was there even like school per se? Is it just the woods were your school? Like, how did you? What was your understanding of the outside world?
When I was growing up, I remember we had homeschool, and then we didn't have like a school season. We just did our books. We called doing our books. That's what it was called. Like, go do your books. We would just sit there and we'd do our homework, and we didn't even call it homework. We just call it school books. And like I said, we're so isolated where our language and everything was different than the Huslia kids and stuff. It was just we had our own type of way of speaking and everything, and we all sounded and looked the same according to all the natives in Huslia. They were always excited to see us, but we were like the odd bunch coming from the woods, and the books we would read was I remember reading our school books and they talked a lot about like Virginia, and so we were really interested in what the outside world was. So I remember really liking the books that talked about like when the pilgrims first came over or whatever, eating turkey and the apple trees and all that. And that's about all the real contact we had. And our dad was white though. He was from California and he moved to Alaska when he was 18 or 20 or something like that after World War II. He did the World War II thing and came to Alaska. So he would tell us stories too. And I remember being fascinated by fruit trees and him talking about how there was figs on the trees because we were hungry a lot and having fresh fruit was like a dream come true. So I remember hearing about that a lot, but other than that, we didn't have much contact. And in my mind, I thought everybody in the outside of our camp, we call living in camp, I thought everybody was rich because people had nicer snow machines than us. They had a lot of people had running water or flushing toilets. They didn't have outhouses and good food, candy was available and stuff like that. Pancakes, syrup, sugar, endless butter. I mean, those things we didn't have. We ran out of all of that. So, in my mind, everybody was rich in the city. Everybody had money, cars and stuff. So, in my mind, leaving camp, even at 18, I thought you kind of just walk into money. So, I had it real hard when I first left camp at 18, is being so freaking broke and actually hungry, but surrounded by food. I could smell the restaurants and stuff, and that I didn't like that because I remember I was homeless in Fairbanks when I first moved out into the city, and I didn't know how to navigate in life. I was scared to talk to people. Even doing a live like this was a big deal. I'd be freaking out. So probably one of the biggest accomplishments in my life is being able to just talk to people because I was really nervous when I first left camp and easily bullied, easily manipulated by society because society is a jungle in itself with all the different personalities and deceitful things that can happen to it, all that. It's so easy to be vulnerable when you don't know the system and being guarded. I was so guarded when I left camp. So yeah, I remember being hungry though when I first left camp in the city, and I didn't like that because I could smell the fast food joints and stuff from a long ways away, but I couldn't eat. And that's a lot more humiliating than just not having it at all.
I want to talk a little bit about that experience of leaving the woods for the first time. But you mentioned your dad coming from California, white guy, obviously, presumably met a native person. Do you know anything about sort of his philosophy? Was it always an intention to move out and move away from society? I mean, obviously, there are a lot of people who not a lot of people, but a significant amount of people who move off the grid. But that's a big choice, moving from California, having 14 kids, and not just like moving to Alaska, like moving to deep Alaska with very little contact. Do you know why?
It was in the 40s, I believe, when he made his journey to Alaska, and I believe it was trains. I don't think there was much for highways back then and vehicles. I know he made his way and he worked on farms, he said a lot, and he was just trying to get away from he must have wanted to be isolated because he lived in the woods his whole time. And I know he made his way and he ended up in along the coast of Alaska. I think he ended up in Bethel area, and he literally walked hundreds of miles through the woods and ended up in Ruby, which is in the deep interior of Alaska. So he didn't he talked about it, but he didn't talk about it much, I guess. I hear a lot of stories from other people like that got to talk to him more from Huslia, his friends in Huslia, because the natives really loved my dad. I mean, he was just like he was definitely one of the people and who was one of the respected elders in Huslia, and that came out of Huslia or was tied into it, and I remember him talking about he had like a 22 for small game when he walked into the middle of Alaska interior, which is hundreds of miles from the ocean, and a rifle, and, maybe some rabbit snares or whatever. But he just ate small game and made his way and ended up in Ruby. And he was a trapper out of Ruby. He wanted to do mining, is what he said he wanted. He was after gold, but then he was kind of a hippie too. I don't think he really liked the destruction that mining brought. So he became more of a woodsman, trapper. And that's where my mom and her dad flew to Ruby. Something was going on in Ruby, and they ended up in Ruby, and that's where her and my dad met, was in Ruby. And then they lived outside of Ruby, about downriver from Ruby, about 18 miles below Ruby, village of Ruby. And then after a while, they ended up moving to Husla, where my mom is from. That's where her mom and dad was from, my grandma and grandpa and all her people and their people. So that's where they ended up moving. And then from there, they moved out to the North Fork of the Husla River, where I was raised, 100 miles upriver.
Somebody wants to know if your dad was a vet, a World War II vet.
He was a World War II veteran. He never spoke about it much. And from what I thought, growing up in the woods, I didn't have much knowledge about World War II. I thought it was like a real weak war, like one of those wars that didn't really mean much. But then later on, I remember seeing those crazy movies, where they're storming the beaches and all this crazy stuff, and it was a real rugged war. I remember asking some locals or talking to some local old guys about it. And they said, "Yeah, your dad had it real rough in the war," and he never talked about it much to me or any of the kids. He said that his mom wrote a letter to some high-ranking military person, and he just had to like basically cook and do dishes or something like that. But then that older person in Husa, he just laughed and said, "Nobody has connections like that. You think a poor family would have connections to have his son do something like that?" He said he had it pretty rough time in the war, went through some hard stuff, but he never talked about it with us.
And you talked about leaving when you were 18. Was that something that was common? Where do you fall in the 14 kid, in that group? And then was it common that like, okay, you turn 18, did you think you wanted to, I don't know, go to high school or college or find a job? Or did your older brothers and sisters leave? Or was it something you had to, say like, I don't want to call it escaping, but that you had to, what was it expected that you would leave or expected that you would stay? And why did you decide that?
To be honest, I was dying to leave. You know, I was
Yeah.
I was isolated and I wanted to explore the world. And um, there was 11 older siblings than me, and I'm the third youngest. And some of the family had already left home before I was old enough to remember. And so I didn't really know some of my older siblings because they were living out in California, some of them in Fairbanks. There was probably like Selena, Norvin, Thelma, and Victor, the four oldest ones that I'd never really met before. And I remember my first time meeting my brother Victor, and I was so excited because we used to write them letters and they would write back. So the connection was always there. But I just remember bugging him too much for money. I was in Huslia with my dad. I got to go to town with him in the winter. I went to Huslia with Snow Machine, and I remember bothering Victor every day. "You got money? You got money? I want to go to the store and buy candy." And he said, "I don't have no money. I'm broke." And I didn't even know what that was. And like I said before, I thought everybody was rich that was in town, So, but yeah, I grew up. I kind of lost track there on the question, but oh yeah, when I was 18, I left home, and pretty much all of us wanted to leave home. When we're 18, our mom used to say, "You're on your own when you're 18." She used to be tough on us, like in a not a, I knew she wasn't completely serious, but she'd say, "When you're 18, you got to get out of here and you got to survive on your own. She say, you know, she used to say, this sink or swim out there. It ain't no cakewalk. When you leave home, it's sink or swim, and you got to be on your own. Don't come crawling back here with your tail between your legs. She used to be kind of give us this tough speech every now and then, so we'd be ready. And she was right. It was tough out in the society. You know, we thought it was easy because it looks easy from the outside, being in the woods looking in. So we didn't realize how, you know, because like I said, when I was 20, I was basically homeless in Fairbanks, you know, trying to survive. But yeah, I was excited to leave, and I was a few years behind in high school, so I didn't graduate till I was 19. I ended up finishing high school in Hoosler.
So, and sorry if this is a sensitive subject, you talked about it on the show a little bit, but I'd love to maybe go a little bit more in depth and talk about those early years, sort of a young Rico, once you got out of, once you left the family cabin. You know, you've mentioned maybe some homelessness and some maybe trouble with the law. Obviously, talk about whatever you feel comfortable, but would love to hear a little bit about those early years in society.
When I first moved out of camp, it was, you know, I was 18, and I went to high school in Bettles, and then I started, you know, being in the village, in the different village, going to school and going to North Pole High School in the city. I was um, first time exposed to people, so I was really nervous all the time. I was scared. I was scared to talk. I was shy. So in a way, I was really lonely, but I was surrounded by people, which is weird because, you know, being in camp, you're lonely and you have all these dreams of coming into society and having all this fun, but it doesn't always work out that way. You have to find your path in society. And I wasn't ready for that. So I think I was really guarded and lonely. And for that reason, I think I easily fell into alcohol. And when I drank I was able to open up and be myself and be comfortable. And that's a bad combination there, loneliness and not secure, and then adding alcohol to find your path. So I did get really bad into alcohol, and there was others too like that. You know, there's other natives that grew up in the villages that have it tough like that. They're just not used to. They know everybody around them, so when they move to the city, they have that same problem. And I think a lot of people that end up, a lot of natives that we know, they end up in the cities, and then kind of get in their own circle of kind of a party atmosphere. And I think I fell right into that. So definitely ended up in that. And I ended up quitting drinking though at 22, and I started to find my way in life. But the problem is, you know, I had a serious addiction before. You know, I had drugs, cocaine, and alcohol. So I kind of knew the streets a lot. So I pretty much fell into selling drugs in the end at the age of 22, and that went on for a long time. And I ended up getting caught up and shoot. It must have been '03 when I went to prison, and I did over 3 years in prison altogether. Got out in '05, and that's when I finally, you know, Simone was born by the time I got out of jail, my oldest daughter, and so I basically started taking life more serious and really finding my way, because addiction comes in many forms, and I had to overcome all that to really be successful and move on.
That's incredible. You know, we briefly talked about it on the show, but I think fans would be surprised to know that, you know, when they see you on the show, you're this family man and very responsible and you know, many kids and taking care of so many people. And it's inspirational, I think, to a lot of people to see how far you've come. Do you feel that? Do you feel that you've come such a great distance from those days experiencing homelessness and dealing drugs and being in prison?
Yeah, I feel like I've come a long ways in figuring out life, and basically not taking chances. Being humble too is important, and being grateful for what I have, especially, you know, even in jail. You know, I look back from now that I kind of look back at a lot of hungry times, you know, from being in the woods to being homeless. And then hustling was, you know, was lucrative for me, and I made a lot of money. But in the end, you know, you're in a prison cell and you're working in a kitchen for 40 cents an hour, and you're hungry, back to being hungry again. So I could never forget all that, you know. So it's so easy to be back in the trenches again. So taking care of myself first, and then being able to take care of my kids. And if I have enough, I could try to take care of other people. But if you can't take care of yourself, you can't take care of nobody.
That's incredible, and congratulations on sobriety and changing. Oh, you've turned. Oh, there you
There
go.
we
Good.
go. I turned my ringer off on this phone, but it's still coming in. I don't know why.
No, it's okay. It happens. This is the least tech live we've had issues wise. So this is good. This is going great.
Okay.
I mean once you started to turn your life around, you got out of prison, were you then making a choice to stay in Fairbanks and live off the land a little bit, or was it, why did you decide, and how often did you go back to the lifestyle you were raised in?
Well, when I was in jail, I remember realizing I got so lost trying to be in the money in the city. That's what I got lost on, I think. And there's nothing wrong with that. You got to have money to survive. I sure as heck didn't want to be hungry in the city anymore. And I wasn't the best at school, can't pay attention in class. But once I was sitting in that cell long enough and I was writing to my dad a lot, my dad was still living in camp. And we had lost my mom by then. But I just realized what I left behind. I remember when I first went to jail, I remember crying because I thought of my dad. And it was 2003, and I was like, man, I might never see him again because he's up there in his 70s. And I remember crying. I didn't stay crying, I just cried, and I accepted my problems in life. And I remember the lawyer coming in trying to get me to snitch on my sources or whatever, but I didn't want to do all that. I got myself in trouble, and I cried about it. I got past it. They sentenced me, and I just did out my 3 year, 1 month sentence they gave me. I thanked the judge for the sentence because they knocked it down a year or so or whatever for taking the deal. And I just remember thinking, man, I really wanted to be in the woods again. I realized what I was missing out on. So when I got out, I was able to get back and see my dad for his last year living out here. And just being out in the woods and being able to eat good food too. That's what I really missed is the native food, moose meat, bear meat, beaver meat, geese, all that stuff. I just really missed that stuff. So I think being in there and being hungry in jail and really helped me become grounded and realize that I do not want to be back in that spot again and to enjoy what I had, what I left behind, and utilize those skills I learned in the woods. And now that I could move and function in society, I could combine those two, and I felt like I could do good in life.
And is this something, obviously we've seen it on the show, but is this something that you've consciously are teaching your children? And people are asking about your kids, how are they? The ones we see on the show, some we haven't. How many kids do you have? Let me talk a little bit about your kids, and then talk a little bit about um, uh, if you're teaching them the ways that you learned growing up.
Yeah, for sure. With my kids, I try to teach them about being grateful and respectful. Be happy for what you got in life, and especially for our culture. Our culture is really grounded. It keeps your mind grounded because it makes you not only respect the people around you and help the people around you, but also the land, your environment. So I really try to teach that to my kids, number one, so that they listen good and they're respectful people. Because as a parent, any parent, you don't want your kids to be disrespectful, of course, and you want them to be good people. So that I just try my best with that. And I use my culture a lot with them because my culture is a beautiful thing that I shouldn't let go.
And do they all want to be in the woods, or some of them want to be home more or less? And how do you try to encourage it? Do you try to force it? How important is it to you for your kids to have that time in the woods?
All my kids seem to be really good at being in the woods with me. I try to make it as comfortable as possible. I don't know if you can see it on the show. You see my boat, see the way I dress them. I'm always questioning if they're cold or hungry. So number one, I really try to make them feel comfortable. And they pretty much all love being in the woods. I would say Keenan is a little stronger to the environment. He's just naturally tougher than I ever was, as a kid. I think like as far as like cold weather and stuff like that, he seems really comfortable to me. He's a little thicker, that's why. He's a thicker boy, so I think he's more and he's more likely to ask me to go with me all the time, and Maya too. But I mean, to be honest, they all love being in the woods. They love it out there.
Someone's asking about Scarlett.
Scarlett is doing good. I don't know if they had any question about her or.
I think they were just saying they haven't seen her on the show in a while.
Oh, she has a hard time with the cameras, I think, compared to the other kids. I think she has a little harder time with the camera, but as far other than that, I think she's probably one of the better shots with a gun, and she's real smart and she loves being in the woods. But I think with filming wise, I think she's a little bit less comfortable with the cameras.
How important is it that they learn how to survive in the woods? Do you have that mentality, like, oh, if it all goes to hell, at least they can go out into the woods and fend for themselves? Is that something that's important for you to teach?
Oh, guaranteed. I mean, you look at society today. I mean, the dollar value, the price of food. I mean, come on, they have to learn to survive. And I really try to teach them. And one of the biggest things I teach them about is being warm in the winter. I dress them up good. And I went out with Skylar a couple of weeks ago, and we went on a long snow machine ride. And he wanted to wear these thin coats and stuff. And I brought the heavy coats with me. And then when we got out there and he started getting cold, I had him gear up some more. And he wanted to turn around. It was cold and windy, but once he put the right gear I had ready for him, because I could just look at him till he wasn't going to be ready, but I wanted him to learn that. And then once he was warm again, when I was putting it on him, he said he wanted to go back. I said, I think we could beat the cold. I have the right gear. It was maybe like 2 below, 3 below, and with a 15-mile-an-hour wind. So once he put the Martin hat on and the right gear on and the parka, he got warm again. And then I told him, you think about what I just did, and think about how you have to dress to stay warm. That's really important because if you want to survive out here, the true alpha human beings out here in the woods in the cold climate is the ones that are comfortable and warm. So I really do teach that to them a lot. Number one is be comfortable, and then two, you could try to find food and continue your journey on.
And I see you teach both of your kids gender-wise equally. Did you grow up with a difference in terms of gender roles? I know sometimes in Native culture there's some difference in gender roles. Is that something that you're aware of in terms of who does what, or you teach sort of everyone equally?
Well, in the native community, like in Husla, I noticed like I would shoot a bunch of geese, and then my lady, her family always plucks the geese, and I'm just like, man, they laughed at me when I was plucking geese. I was like, man, it's weird. I guess they have strong gender roles. And growing up in camp, though, man, it was different with my family. If I didn't want to do dishes and I told my older sister that boys don't have to, I probably would have got beat up. So we all do it. The girls like to hunt too, but in the native community, the girls hunt, native women hunt too. And you're supposed to teach the native girls how to hunt and stuff because sometimes they're stuck in camp alone or in the woods alone. They got to know how to take care of themselves. So it's really important with our culture on that part as far as hunting. But a lot of times at the native community, there is gender roles. But for my part with my family, I try to teach the kids to hunt, fish, trap, all the same.
And people are appreciating hearing about your past, and I appreciate talking about it. As somebody who grew up alone or just with your family in the woods and had a hard time even talking to people, it's quite a change to be sharing your life with millions of people on the show. Did it take you a while to open up? And I think for me personally, some of the favorite episodes are when you are, with your kids and talking about your past and sharing about those struggles. Um, is that something that comes natural to you, or is that something you had to get more comfortable with the camera crew and more comfortable with the audience to share those kinds of stories?
I think at the age of 22, this was like, what was it, 1997 or whatever, 98 actually. when I first quit drinking, that's when I started learning to be comfortable in my own skin, and that's the only way I was able to stay sober. So I was pretty good at making conversation and making friends. I've always had a lot of friends. People, kind of a popular guy, not in a boastful way, but I've always had a lot of good friends, and people like to talk with me and have conversation. And then, so it wasn't when I did the first started doing filming, it was really tough just having the cameras on me, but it didn't take too long to kind of forget the cameras are there. But that's not where I started learning to talk and being able to communicate with other people. Not really so much when the camera started rolling. It was before that. But like you said, the cameras on you is a scary thing at first, but I think you adjust quicker than you realize. And it can almost be harder to do public speaking because when there's an audience in front of you, a bunch of faces looking at you, that can be a lot more challenging than just talking with a few guys that you got used to over a few days and they got cameras pointed at you. That's not as hard as people realize.
Did you, when you first started on the show and first started to get awareness, when your kids also, is that strange? I guess I hate to use the word fame, but relatively speaking, famous. Like, do you get recognized at the airport or recognized, at the grocery store? And is that weird, or what's it like to interact with fans?
Well, when it first started happening, I was happy it was happening because obviously, if it doesn't happen, you're not doing your job or you aren't too popular or whatever with the show. So when it first started happening, I was quick to embrace it. But to be honest, it's not that big a deal because I'm not like an A-list celebrity. It's not like I'm freaking, John Cena or whoever, like there's not paparazzi chasing me around. And I'll have friends around me sometime and someone will come like, oh my God, let me get a picture with you. And then my friends will easily assume that it's such a big deal. But you get so used to that, it's not that big of a deal, really. It's just people that watch the show and they want to interact. Some of them are super. It's crazy how excited they can be to meet me. And then it happens in pockets too sometimes. Like sometimes you'll go through the day, not many people recognize you, and then all of a sudden you'll be like going through an area or something, everybody recognizes you. It's kind of strange in that sense. Like you could walk into a store and everybody's like, oh, that's a guy on TV, and it all starts happening like that. Or you might go through the store and maybe one or two, or maybe nobody recognizes you. So it's but like I said, it's not A-list celebrity. The A-list celebrity people, they're just like swarmed, and it's not that serious.
Good. Well, maybe we want to get to that point. That means the show will get even more popular.
Yeah, I could easily try to lie and say, "Oh yeah, it's so great being famous," but to be honest, I'm not that famous.
Um, and let's talk a little bit about some of that feedback. Obviously there's a lot of people online. 99.999% of people who comment love the show. There is that occasional haters, I guess. Is that something that you gets to you? Did you have to learn to like not engage, or how do you deal with that kind of let's just call it negative feedback?
Yeah, that happens, and it depends on when it hits you, man. Like sometimes I might just be having, sometimes you're having a bad day, you're just not in the mood, and you open up your Facebook or something, and you see something, and someone hits you with something, you just pop off and fire right back, which is never good. So, to be honest, it doesn't happen very often, but it can easily happen. And I think the one that gets me is when there's like local people that know me from like Fairbanks or surrounding villages, and when they say something to me, then it's like my guard goes up quick. Other than that, it doesn't really bother me too much, and it doesn't happen that much, to be honest.
Some people are asking about your current situation where you live. Are you in the family cabin or Fairbanks or North Pole? Where are you currently living? And obviously, it does not look like a couch you'd have at the family cabin.
I'm
So,
actually I'm actually in Anchorage right now. I come down here every now and then. Some corporation paid my way down here to set something up, some future project going on. So I'm in Anchorage at the moment, but I have like a bunch of wolf snares and wolverine traps out around Huslia, so I'm pretty dedicated to Huslia right now. But then my family is in Fairbanks and I have a house in Fairbanks, so I'm back and forth a lot with Fairbanks and Huslia. I just got out of Huslia. I was out there for 2 weeks and had one client. I have this tour thing. I'm doing tours now, and I had this client come out, so I took him around for 4 days, and he was supposed to be able to drive a snow machine, but he was having trouble because it's not as easy driving a snow go as you think. So I ended up putting him on the back and on the seat behind me, and worked out real well. He had a good time. But yeah, I'm back and forth between Huslia and Fairbanks. The family cabin, the floor still hasn't been done, so it's super cold in there in the winter. So not really trying to overnight in the family cabin right now. Me and my brother Lee is supposed to fix it up this spring. All the materials there, we just have to gut the whole floor, lift the cabin, get it nice and level, and hang a new floor, and then it'll be nice and warm again.
It's a shame I hear that and I'm thinking, oh, okay, when are we gonna film that? What are the but
Heartbreaking.
it is. And we'll talk a little bit about that in the future. So your time is divided all over. Obviously, you're doing stuff for native corporations, and then you're with your family. How how far are these places from each other in terms of like Huslia to Fairbanks, and then the family cabin? And I know it's different depending upon the time of year, but generally give people a sense of the scope and scale of Alaska and how it pertains to you.
Where I'm at in Alaska is where Huslia is, the interior. The biggest hub city is Fairbanks. I just drove a snow go about 340 miles from. I drove a truck 150 miles to Manly, where the road ends, with the snow going back. Unloaded it, then drove 340 miles, which is 2 days of travel. And I went through 70 miles down the river from Manly. I hit Tanana. Then from Tanana, I went 120 miles down the Yukon to Ruby, and then 60 miles down the Yukon to Galena. Then I overland 100 miles with the snow going to Huslia. Broke trail a long ways too. And that was my trip to Huslia. And then I flew out, which is, I left the snow go there. Then I flew back to Fairbanks when I was done a few days ago. And that's an hour and 40-minute flight in an eight-seater plane. And then I came down here by airplane, which is 1 hour on Alaska Air. That's Fairbanks to Anchorage is a city. Or you could drive with a truck, Fairbanks to Anchorage. That's about 6 hour drive, 350 miles. So yeah, it's a lot of moving around, but yeah, it's
You know, people don't. I think everyone knows how big. Everyone knows that Alaska is big, but until you just travel it, and just like you say, like when you went from Fairbanks to Huslia, you know, it's like 150 miles by truck, and then another 300 miles by snow machine, and an overnight, and you know, it's just the distance and scale is incredible.
yeah, and not everyone can do these trips, I mean, majority of the people that even live out in Alaska, even in the villages, a good majority of them can't even make those kind of trips. You have to be kind of know what you're doing and know your machine and have all your survival gear and all that, because you could end up dead real quick out there. It's serious business.
Talk a little bit about that. Let's talk about the dangers of living in Alaska. I mean, everyone who's grown up and lived in Alaska has lost people and to either weather or a variety of things. Is risk is danger something that is just an everyday part of your life, something you think about?
Yeah, like especially for me driving. If I'm driving on a long journey like that, even 40 miles, I'm watching the sky a lot. I'm looking at the sky. Do I see a wall of clouds coming? And that could be a storm. It might look like just a line in the sky of clouds, but it could turn into a windstorm and then the snow kicks up. And do I have the right gear? If I have to switch out, I have to be able to switch out all into new gear if my gear gets wet. I have tarp in case I need to make shelter. I mean, you got to be ready to camp. Weather can kill you. And it's not just the storm. The storm rolls in. If that doesn't kill you, your visibility goes so far down, and you'll lose the trail. The trail will just wipe out in front of you. It doesn't matter. You could turn around and try to go back, and your trail is gone. So you're trapped out there in that sense. And what happens is if you lose the trail long enough, you're going to end up in a water hole because some places don't freeze. There's warm water coming out from like a lake back there, and the water is seeping into the river, and it's causing warm water coming out, and the river is wide open right there. It's flowing in one spot. So that's the killer right there. Open water will wipe you out if the weather doesn't. And I see a lot of wolf tracks on the trail. If you break down out there and you don't have a gun, you can get into big trouble. People say wolves don't kill people, but if you Google that lady that got killed in 2015 she moved to Alaska, school teacher, and she went for a jog with her headphones on. And just that sound of someone running down the trail, the wolves heard that, and that's an odd sound. Someone was in distress or something, and they ended up killing and eating her. So, you got to watch out not only with her, open water, but the animals too. You got to be ready for all that stuff.
That's terrible. Let's talk a little bit about wolves. That's maybe one of the sensitive topics over the years, and let's talk a little bit about how you feel about that. And obviously, the show has evolved in terms of it being a cultural thing that it's now something that we can show on the show. It was a little more difficult to show that early on, but talk about wolf trapping, which, can be a sensitive topic for some.
Yeah, well, for us native people, we had wolf fur. I mean, wolf parkas, wolf ruffs on our, protects our face. So wolfing is important to our culture as far as clothing, but also predator control. And if you look at the history of Alaska, Indians and Eskimos, we're all spread out all over the land in different bands all over. And we interacted with the predators a lot more than today because now we're kind of in small villages and we don't own the land. We have a right to be in the village. So we're not, there's a lot of open country out there. And even when natives started settling in villages and not becoming nomadic, they still had a high price for wolf furs, the price of snow machines and gas and all that. People were hunting wolves a lot more through all the way into the 80s, from what I remember. Then I think starting in the mid 90s on, it seemed like people kind of quit hunting them and they became very populated in Alaska, along with grizzly bears. So our moose numbers and caribou numbers are way down, and the number of predators are real high. So a lot of us out here, stronger people out here in Alaska, are really looking into predator control to try to help our moose and our caribou. And thankfully, Hoosley is good with moose right now, and we're trying to knock them down to the north to try to get knock down the wolf numbers to the north, try to get our caribou numbers up because the caribou numbers are just taking a nosedive in the last 10 years. So, yeah, I know it's a sensitive subject, but that's part of our culture is managing the land. We don't just live off the land, we live with the land. And if we see a problem and we see our moose having trouble or our caribou having trouble, we try to assess the situation and people talk to each other and we know what's going on out there and what needs to be done. And we have to do it unapologetically. We just have to do it. We can't worry about what people are going to think because we have to have food on our table. A lot of people eat from those animals.
Absolutely. You mentioned Eskimos and Indians. We talked a little bit about that, those terms. It's something that we've explored a little bit on the show. And early on, I remember some early conversations with Agnes, who identified as Eskimos, and I was always taught like, oh wait, that's a bad word. And Agnes was insistent that she is Eskimo. So maybe talk a little bit about those terms, and then also talk a little bit about the difference between Eskimo and Indian interior culture or the water cultures and those kinds of things.
Yeah, I know that term. I guess I use it loosely without realizing it, and I know some people get offended by it, but I know a lot of Inuits or Inupaks that still use the term. I mean, there's a lot of people that I feel like sometimes cancel culture gets so carried away that we end up in predicaments where we we go too far down one road. But I have to respect it though. I guess I could say Inupak and um, yeah, back in the day our people would war with the Inupaks, which was over the mountain, but we also traded with them. And not only with Inupaks too, but like the Koyukon Athabaskans, we didn't get along with the Gwich'in Athabaskans. So there's all these old beefs that used to happen. And we're all securing our land, our borders to our lands, and sometimes those got pushed one way or the other, whichever ones were stronger. But yeah, there was definitely different languages within different tribes and different beefs and different borders between different tribes. But I think in the end, like we don't own the land anymore, so we all end up. I think kind of squashing all the old beefs in a way. I mean, you'll see it every now and then. We might have that upriver, downriver talk. You know, people talk bad about this or that, but it's not that serious anymore. And when I go over to Kobuk River, I'm treated really good. They have real good hospitality. They treat our people really good. They're the Inupiaq people. And when they come over to the Indian side, where we're from, the Athabaskan people, we always show them real good hospitality, and we get along well. But there's a deep history of not only wars but trading, because they had muktuk whale fat. They had seal skin and seal oil. We had birch trees, which you could make snowshoes and all kinds of stuff out of. Birch punk, that stuff that grow on the side of birch trees. We did episodes on that, and that's really good in the summer because it smolders and keeps mosquitoes, gnats, and bears don't like the smell. So if you're sleeping at night, if a bear or something try to get downwind of your camp and see what's going on, you know, their noses, their eyes, and that smoke will blind all that. So it's kind of like an insurance to sleep at night having birch punk, and also keeps the mosquitoes away because mosquitoes, they smell you and they see your feel your heat, but a lot of them come off your breath and stuff, and with that smoke in the air, it dissipates them. So there's a lot of beautiful natural resources we have in our area, and the Inuits have it in their area. So there was people like someone in my tribe that could speak Inupiaq and Indian, and then they would get along with the other people, and they would bring a crew. The other side would bring a crew, and they meet up at the hot springs, Silver Hot Springs, where we did episodes before on the show. That was one of the big meeting spots, and they would trade their goods and go separate ways once a year.
What people are talking, asking a little bit about your Athabaskan culture. So let's talk a little bit about that. Do you have a favorite food? And also, I'm curious about the language. We see you speak it on the show. Did you speak it growing up? Are you fluent? Is it just words? So maybe talk a little bit about your culture specifics and maybe go a little bit, deeper than we get to on the show.
Um, my mom's first language was Athabaskan, so she spoke it a lot. And when my our grandma would come out and stay at our camp for a week or so, I'd hear them talking it a lot because they could. That's how they grew up. My mom grew up talking with her mom, so I remember hearing it a lot then. Or other elders around, the first thing they do is they start talking in Indian to each other. So I heard it a lot, and she would try to teach us too. But unfortunately, I'm not fluent because I didn't embrace it when she was still around, especially growing up. I remember her like sitting us all down. She's going to teach us how to talk Indian. And then I would just lose interest or something. I remember one time I made her real mad because I wasn't paying attention, and she said, "You ask a word, what do you want to know, and I'll tell you." And I said, "How do you say hammer?" And man, she got mad because Indians didn't have hammers. She thought I was messing with her, and but yeah, I don't speak it fluently, but I do understand a lot of it, and I still use it a lot. And especially if you catch an animal, you want to give respect to an animal, you would use the Athabaskan words, and you'd want to learn words like that it's showing more respect to the animal in our belief. And
Did you get cursed out in Athabaskan?
oh yeah, I remember her saying some cuss words. She never told us what it meant, but some of them I figured out. She had a couple of cuss words she used.
Uh, we're getting a couple questions about what is your favorite food, native food, and what fur is the warmest?
The warmest fur man, I'd say wolf is one of the warmest. Beaver fur is warm, but sometimes like the marten hats you see me wear, um, there's probably warmer skins, but we like the marten hat because you could kind of hear through it, and it's the comfort of it. And we just put an extra layer over it or put a ruff over it if we want to get warmer. So it's not always about how warm because you could end up sweating in some of that stuff. Um, the best foods, for me, like say growing up in the woods, the best food, what you're hungry for the most is what's coming into season. Say like springtime, like March right now. Say March is coming up. The number one thing that we want right now is beaver meat because they're not too fat in the fall time because they've been working all summer and into the fall. Then they sit in their house and all they do is eat, and they're swimming in and out of the house to their feed pile, and they become very healthy. They become fat. So that's the one we're after right now. And it tastes so good when it's fresh. Meat tastes so good when it's fresh. And then after a while, we're going to go get caribou. What we did on the episode, we go and we get fresh caribou meat. And then once the geese start coming in, they got that flavor from the south, the corn and barley fields out there. It's a whole different flavor. So that we start eating that. Then it goes into fish. And then fall time, of course, there's bear meat and moose meat. That's number one. So to answer that question, my favorite native food is the one that's in season at the time, the freshest, and it's in the like I said on one episode, I don't know if anyone remember, I said we have a short window where we hunt the animal, where we bother them a little bit, and then we have a long window where we just leave them alone. That's our native way right there. We don't bother them, but when they're nice and prime, we go out and we harvest them, and then we're done. We try to look out for them after that. And even like on the show, you see wolf. You know, I like to go after wolf, but summertime you see that wolf on the bank while we're in the boat and I'm howling to it. That animal, no, I'm not going to bother him in the summertime. But if it was winter, he'd be gone.
All right, we have about 10 or 15 minutes left. So, talk a little bit about filming, and what have been some of the biggest challenges in terms of filming and having a crew.
The biggest challenge with filming is, like I said, them driving snow goes getting stuck. They're lacking knowledge of the land, so hunting, trying to have them be quiet is a hard one. Not to bump their feet when they step off the boat, because that bump sound, the moose might be in the lake, and we're gonna go check a lake, and that moose is gonna be like, "Oh, if he hears a bump noise, he's really gonna." Because only when animals run do they bump the ground. So a lot of people don't realize how bad it is to have heavy feet. You could break sticks or whatever. Sticks break with animals and stuff, but bumping the ground, that's a bad one. So the biggest challenges with the crew is just them following me around and trying to keep up. I'd say like in my episodes, a lot of my episodes, you see me moving. I'm out on the land, and that's very challenging. It's so much easier to do it yourself, home builds, around camp or whatever, because no one has to travel. But I try to keep it exciting. And when I do stories and they want to do stories with me, I tell them what I'm doing. I try to tell them I'm going out to do something so that they do those stories instead, because there's a lot of people that are better carpenters than I am. And but yeah, that's the biggest challenge with the crew is just them following me around. But other than that, they're real good company.
Let's talk a little bit about what you got going on now, life after life below zero, and how people can stay in touch with you. You mentioned maybe the YouTube video, but also tours. Sort of maybe talk a little bit about what you got going on nowadays, and how people can stay in touch. I know you're pretty active on social media.
Yeah, I've been posting more on social media now that I'm not filming, but tours is fun. It's a learning thing. So if people wanted to get out there and enjoy Huslia country and move around out there, summer or winter, it's possible. I have an extra snow machine, but if they can't drive and they end up tipping over too much, they could always jump on back. I'm a good driver, so they can keep up with me that way. And boating, of course, is a lot easier. But yeah, that's about what I have going on right now. And also, I'm getting my assistant guiding license for hunting with Gilbert Huntington out of Galena area. But he goes up towards Huslia, where I'm at, and he does moose hunts and grizzly hunts. So I'm looking forward to doing that kind of work with him and just taking people out. And I think I got a lot of experience doing it by bringing the film crew out. So it's not too challenging, and I know what to expect.
Harry is asking about where the crew stays when they're at camp. How are the conditions for the crew?
They usually stay in Arctic ovens, but there was times in the summer they all had to move into my cabin because a grizzly came around and was, growling and knocking stuff over at night and scared them out of their tents. So a lot of times in the summer they'll stay right in my cabin if they have to. And wintertime though, they have Arctic ovens outside and they kind of keep them out of the way so the film crew doesn't pick them up and they stay in those.
Talk a little bit about just the couple minutes that we have left. Have you had any opportunities to interact with other people on the show, other cast members? Do you ever organically run into them in the woods or in Alaska, or and what's that been like?
Not really. I see some of the hailstones every now and then when I'm lucky to see them. And Jesse Holmes, I ran into him once in Fairbanks. I ran into Andy a few times in Fairbanks before. But other than that, we don't really talk too much. Message back and forth a little bit, but not too much. We all have our own lives and we're pretty busy. So, yeah.
We have a couple follow-up questions that I'll get to. Someone's asking about eating wolves, or is it just about the fur?
No, it's just about the fur. If you eat wolves, you could get sick. They have a lot of parasites, and we have to cut their joints. And we have a cultural way of putting them away. We cut their joints, bring them out and off the main trails out, put them back out on the land where the scavengers spread their bones. And our belief is that their parasites in their bones can get into your joints and stuff and get you sick over time. It's their way of ensuring that they get brought back out on the land.
And maybe talk a little bit about native medicine. Do you embrace both types? You know, we've seen you have different types of things on the show, but also you go to a more traditional doctor. Is native food, native medicine something that's important to you?
Yeah, I mean, there's like boiling spruce needles if you have a bad cold. There's a lot of different things we do that has more of the traditional healing. Pitch has value, spruce pitch. Um, but no, I use definitely go to modern medicine a lot too, and it's not something I don't depend completely on either of them.
And what's the future hold for you? You talked a little bit about the tours and stuff, and you know, do you think how important, I guess, culturally, and then also just to you personally, is future planning? Like, this might sound like a strange question, but like, do you think about your age? Do you think about uh, passing away? Do you think about yeah? Do you think about the? And I don't mean like next year. I mean like future. Do you think about the future?
I do, but mostly, like my kids are not grown yet, and the kids got to eat. So that's what I think about is I got to make money, and I also got to hold on to my values in life and enjoy the outdoors while I'm still young. So I try to do both. And as far as the future right now, what it holds, I'm not too sure. The show is, I don't know if it's going to get picked up by another network or if I got other, like someone from Discovery or whatever hit me up to try to jump on one of their shows. I don't know what it's going to be like though, and I have some ideas to start my own show if nothing else happens. I got funding for it, but like I'm tied into a contract right now, so and I'm hoping Life Below Zero continues. I really enjoyed Life Below Zero, and I'd rather be with Life Below Zero than anything else, number one. And think
Well,
it's a
first.
good show.
Personally, I appreciate hearing that, of course. What has been some of the most positives of being on the show and you know, being on Life Below Zero?
I think the most positive thing for me with Life Below Zero is being able to slow down with the kids. And I try to be a good parent, but it taught me to be even more um, patient with my kids. And the audience likes to hear the kids ask questions and me answer them. And a lot of times when as parents, we just see like just watch and learn, but you realize how important it is to slow down and answer all the questions they have. It's a very beautiful thing. So it slowed me down and kept me grounded as a parent, I think, and made the connection a lot stronger between me and the kids.
I gotta tell you, even personally, you know, obviously I've seen a lot of the show, if not all of it. And one of the things that I respond to just personally as a dad is watching how patient you are with your kids. You know, sometimes I'm trying to do like nothing is like being cold and on a snow machine, but just like building something small in the garage. And you know, you get a lot of questions, and I often think about how you say like one of the greatest challenges, but greatest rewards is that ability to slow down and be present with your kids.
True, very true.
What do you think, I guess, how have having your kids on the show been for you and then for them? You know, we talked a little bit in the beginning about how some of them like it more, some of them don't. Do they get recognized in school? Is it something that they enjoyed?
Yeah, I think they enjoyed it. I think the kids missed filming. I know that. They missed the whole filming. They missed all the crew. The crew was really good with hanging out with the kids and being nice and making it fun for them. So the kids really do miss Life Below Zero filming and I think it helped us get a lot of good recognition, and a lot of people that some people didn't like me in the past, maybe because of my past history, but they learned to have a lot of respect for me just from watching the show. A lot of people watch the show and they really enjoy the part with me and my kids, and they got to see a part of me that's a beautiful thing, and I appreciate that. It was what the show did for me and the family.
That's wonderful. Is there any, I mean, that kind of says what my next question was, but is there anything you want to talk about to the fans or anything that you haven't had a chance to say or really that we don't directly address the audience on the show.
Hmm.
Um,
No,
we're getting a lot of positive messages. People are saying how much they enjoy not just this conversation, but watching you and all the things that you've taught over the years. A lot of love out there.
thank you to all the fans. I really appreciate it, and all the love and support. And I apologize to the fans when I don't answer, because a lot of fans will message me and I don't answer them. And I feel bad about that, but I really can't keep up, to be honest. It's so hard to keep up with myself and my family sometimes that I could read the messages. I appreciate the messages, but I just don't have time to respond. And then they would respond, and it turns into an interaction that I just don't have the time for. So big apologies to the fans for not being able to respond to all of them, and I really appreciate all the love and support they gave us. And I appreciate that they appreciate what we have.
That's wonderful. I guess we'll do one more question. Last question is how has the show impacted the communities? Has it been a benefit to Huslia and surrounding areas?
The show is really good about hiring local people to help with the film crew, especially like if they had to come out to the cabin with snow machines and the trail wasn't good, the crew would be hired. They would hire a crew to come out and stake the trail for them and make it easier for the film crew and tag along with them to get them to location. Things coming in on the plane that we're not around to receive, they always paid the villagers to hold those parcels coming in on the airplane. So a lot of support, sponsorship for dog mushing. They gave money for sponsorship, raffle items, stuff like that. Yeah, the film crew is really missed by the villages out there. The local villages got a lot out of the film company.
That's wonderful. Well, Rico, I miss you. I miss filming the show. I hope there's more in the future. As I said, I don't have any inside information, but fingers crossed. Even if it is the end, or at least the end of how we knew it. I want to thank you personally for all of the everything that you've given to the show and all the incredible opportunities we've had filming you and your family and everything that you've shared with us.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you to you and all you've done for our community, Disney, National Geographic, the fans, all that support we got from all you is really appreciated, and thank you.
Awesome. All right. Well, that's it. Thanks, everybody. And we will be replying to comments in continuing in the chat, both here on YouTube and the chat on Facebook. Tomorrow we have a Facebook Live with the Hailstones, same time. Thank you all for watching.